tonight, who is Eldon Nelson. He has his MS and BS from the University of Minnesota. He's also a PE, registered PE. He's a verification application engineer for Synopsys currently, and he's also worked for Intel, Micron, IBM in the past, Unisys, and then National Science Foundation. He's also been very active in IEEE. He used to be on the board here, and he's actually currently the Twin Cities section chair, which is pretty impressive. So he's going to talk about his Tesla Model S, and please welcome Eldon Nelson.
Gonna figure out this little remote here. Okay. All right. So yeah, thanks a lot, Paul, for that intro. Be talking the way that I wanted this talk to be is kind of like if you have questions, you can definitely go through it. Like it's kind of not a super technical talk. I'm not going to be talking about like lots of equations, but it's just more like this is what it's like to be an owner of an electric car and some of the things that are interesting about it and some things you might want to think about going forward. So yeah, let's see if the one thing I want to do is I do have a blog, 10,000failures.com. So I'm a verification engineer, and so we're really into finding failures, and so that's a really good name there. Some other things I'm into, I took a new job about 2 years ago with Synopsys. They're they're EDA vendor, so they sell simulators and all sorts of other things dealing with EDA design. And my new job has me moving to the kind of traveling from the Twin Cities and other places in the Midwest quite a lot, and so that's kind of my impetus for this whole talk is I got a job with a lot of travel now, and so now I was thinking about my car. One of the things that I've been playing a game called Overwatch quite a lot. So if you're into competitive video games, we can hang out. Since I am the chair of the Twin Cities section of IEEE, I was going to do a plug for you guys. So on February 23rd is our annual banquet, and we have a speaker there. He's going to be talking about autonomous vehicles, and this is a great event to bring your girlfriends or your boyfriends, your wife or spouses. It's a really fancy event, like a Thai type event. We have people also from MFES, which is the Minnesota Engineering Society. And so last year we had about 123 people, and hopefully can do a lot more this year. And it's at St. Thomas. So yeah, please, you guys are invited. It's one of the fanciest dinners you'll ever get. So my car history, these are the cars that I've actually bought new. So 2005, bought a Corolla, and at that time, mile per gallon was 29, which is actually pretty good as a small car. 2012, my wife got the Corolla, and then I got a Prius. I really liked that car. I thought it was a fun car to drive. It's definitely not, it's not comparable, because then in 2018, I bought a Tesla Model S. And the interesting thing is, like, I think this is a great trend that the miles per gallon is increasing. And with electric cars, of course, we don't use gas, so there's no such thing as gallon anymore. And so that MPGE is actually, I think it's kind of a dumb way of measuring anything, but I will go through how they actually calculate that, because they try to figure out like how much energy is actually in a gallon of gas and how efficient your engine is to get there, or your motor is. And so yeah, I'll kind of talk about that. But those are all my cars, and they've actually all been black. I didn't find a Corolla black picture because I'm too lazy, so no, I always drive black cars. So the cars that Tesla has, I'll kind of show them what they are. So the Model 3 actually went into production, mass production, just last year in January. And the prices kind of vary between 35 and 64. The 35 is a little bit not there yet. They're more at like 40,000, but they're eventually going to have a cheaper one. So that's the Model 3. It's kind of like a BMW 3 Series, if you know what it is, like a little bit smaller than a full-size car. To Tesla Model X, I've seen this one in so many rap videos lately. Like, I think it's become kind of an icon of rap video people. And so the price kind of is up there. And this is the one with the gull wing doors that open up kind of like a Lamborghini or something. Is that the one that opens up that way? I'm not quite sure, but that's the Model X. And the car that I actually got was this Tesla Model S. And this car went in first production in 2012. By Tesla, and a lot of the outside has changed slightly, but the inside actually looks very much like the one in 2012, and it's still really futuristic. And whenever I pick up people or drive people around, they're like, this looks really out of this world as far as like styling, and it's styling from 2012, which if you've seen cars from 2012, it's not that cool. So that's the price range for the Tesla Model S there. I thought this part was interesting. When I made this talk in the Twin Cities in September, it was kind of unclear about how these trends would go. But this is the BMW sales chart for December and kind of total year 2018. And the only number I want you to remember is BMW passenger cars, which includes in North America sales all their BMW 3, 5, 7 series, which are kind of comparable to the Tesla cars and stuff. And also even like the X2, which looks like a small SUV, that's included in BMW's sales number here. And so in the month of December, they had 17,000 sales, and that was pretty consistent. I went back, and there was between 17,000 or so cars a month. But what's kind of interesting, this is the sales chart for a whole bunch of electric plug-in vehicles. And the one to look at is the Tesla Model 3 has the kind of blue arrow there. That car, that single model of the Tesla, it actually sold more than all of BMW sales in North America, like Mexico, Canada, and US, every month since August. And so that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, is like, of all the BMWs you see, all the cars you see, there's that many Model 3s driving around right now, at least for the last few months. And maybe we'll see that trend continue. I think it would be a great thing. But yeah, that's kind of interesting stuff. So you can kind of see the sales. Model 3 is way more popular than my Model S. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. And how much it dwarfs other cars, like Nissan Leaf, you hear that a lot. But it sold almost 10 times more Model 3s last year than the Nissan Leaf.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Are the Model 3s, are they concentrated like in California? Because I don't see many in Minnesota.
Oh, sure.
In Rochester.
I see a lot in the Twin Cities, not in Rochester. Rochester seems to have a lot of Model S's when I drive around, like comparatively a lot, I suppose. But yeah, on 494 when I drive up there, there's Model 3s all over, and they're all super new because they just came out last year. Yeah, I guess I don't know what the distribution is though. That'd be interesting. And so like this one kind of showed like which cars are getting more popular and which are getting less popular. As these are all plug-in electric vehicles, of which like the Model S is one. And so like you can kind of see Model 3, I mean they started with a tiny number for production in 2017, so their percent change is huge. But you kind of see the trend of like the electric Focus has really not gotten very popular, and other things like the Jaguar I-Pace, which probably comes out sometime this spring, like in mass production. They're kind of just starting out here. And one of my friends had a Chevy Volt, and I was cheesing him with this one. This is for a Bolt, but it's like that car, even in August, and this trend kind of continued for the rest of the year. Like it's the amount of people buying a Model 3 versus other plug-in electrics is just it's way different. And so I think we'll kind of switch over to talking about how you measure efficiency and energy in an electric car. So this kind of energy refresher, and so kind of build it up. So a Newton is how much force is kind of pressed down on you. So it's kind of like, for us, it's really gravity. We're kind of thinking about right now, 9.8 meters per second. And then a joule is lifting up something that weighs a certain weight up 1 meter or some distance. And then if you lift something up over and over again, you get watts. And then if you do kilowatt hours, that's kind of like what your power bill is in, and that's kind of important for figuring out how much it costs to run an electric vehicle. You do kilowatt hours, you just have to put the 1,000 in front, and then an hour has 3,600 seconds. And so you can say that a megajoule, 3.6 megajoules, is 1 kilowatt hour. And so the megajoule is just useful because it's a lot easier to do things in megajoules because you don't have like the hour thing when you're doing the equations. And so like just an example, if you lifted a 2 liter of pop, which I'm just going to say is 2 kilograms, 1 meter, that'd be 20 joules. And so the next slide we're kind of look at, so my Tesla Model S 100D, the 100 stands for 100 kilowatt hour, which is roughly how much energy is in the battery pack. I think it's actually slightly more, but the amount usable to me is 100 kilowatt hours. And so 100 kilowatt hours is equal to 360 megajoules. And then we can do some cool stuff with megajoules. So if the Tesla Model S weighs about 5,000 pounds, And so to lift that with the amount of energy that's in the battery, you could lift it up to 10 miles in the air. And I think that's kind of a useful metric to kind of think about is like, if you could imagine a ramp that was 10 miles high, and then you just let the Tesla Model S like coast as far as it could, that gives you like an idea about how far it could go in kind of a way. The cruising altitude of planes is 3,500 feet. And so it's, almost double what a plane flies at. And so that's a lot of energy in something that doesn't move, just a battery. And I don't know, to check my work, this is kind of the cheating way to do it, but you can go on to Wolfram Alpha, and I just kind of typed it in there afterwards to check my work, and yeah, that's how you can double check stuff. So Wolfram Alpha, very cool for just typing in, very abstract physics questions into. So then we can kind of compare it, getting back to the MPGE question. So the gallon of gasoline has 33.4 kilowatts per gallon. And so what you can do, you take 10 gallons, I'm just going to imagine that's like what a standard tank of gas is, and then you can say there's 334 kilowatt hours in 10 gallons of gas. But like you were comparing 10 gallons of gas versus my Tesla with 100 kilowatt hours, there's a kind of like big energy difference there to lift up the car up that height. And so it's like, it's 4 times more or something like that for 10 miles versus 34 miles. And so you have a lot more energy in gas, and you're just not that efficient at it. And so we're going to do this one. So it's kind of interesting to look at, heights of different things. And so how much energy does your home use? So these numbers are maybe a little abstract because you never think about in kilowatt hours very much, except for your energy bill. And the energy bill for like a normal home is in the orange there. It's 897 kilowatt hours per month. And so in Rochester, you'd pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So you'd multiply that by that many. So it'd be like $89 bill is about what the electric bill is. It's probably what you got. And so that is about filling up the Tesla Model S 7 times, just to kind of put these kind of energy numbers in perspective. And so this is from the fueleconomy.org. So you go there, you look up, how many miles per gallon does my car get, like trying to compare all these different variables. And one of the things that's kind of interesting is you can actually, there's a measurement of grid to wheels for an electric vehicle, which is a measurement of from the power plant to your car, and then from your car to the road, like how efficient does that energy gets transferred? And so it's 59%, and I'll show some stuff that actually makes you believe it here. So it's 59% from the power plant to the road, and then it's kind of weird to compare it other ways, but what you do is it's about 20% efficient. Let's see, from getting from the power plant through all the losses and to get into the battery. So if you just look at battery to wheels, an electric car is 79% efficient. And the funny thing is, like, you can think about a gas car, they're always stuck in the 17 and maybe 20% range of getting that energy out of the gas into useful motion. Most of it goes into heat, and it goes into, like kind of waste products or something that comes out of like not motion anymore. And there's lots of loss in transmission and that sort of stuff. So you have a huge efficiency difference, and that's where I think the electric vehicles are kind of getting an edge here. So 79% versus 17% efficiency. And so let's do kind of like some numbers. It's kind of fun math stuff here. So if there's 334 kilowatt hours and 10 gallons of gas, and a Toyota Avalon gets 26 mpg, is their kind of blended thing that you see on the sticker, they're going to be using 1,280 watt hours per mile. So that's the kind of energy per mile. So it's weight used in going gallons per mile or miles per gallon, that sort of stuff. So this makes much more kind of like physics sense. And then we can do a Tesla with 100 kilowatt hour. It can go 335 miles is the EPA range. And so its efficiency is 299 watt hours per mile. And so that difference, that 4%, 4 times difference, exactly the same as what we calculated back here based off of what fueleconomy.gov said, or it's very close. And so it kind of gives a real world, like an Avalon is about the same size as a Tesla Model S. So yeah. it kind of, it's true, I guess. So this is kind of like real world. This is on the Tesla, there's a big screen in the center, and it kind of measures this watt hour per mile stuff. And I'll kind of zoom in on one piece here. So I traveled in this trip meter since last charge. I went 233 miles, and I used 62.5 kilowatt hours. And so you get this efficiency of 268 watt hours per mile. And so the car is actually rated at 300 watt hours per mile. So this was doing slightly better than the rated for that day. And that'd be the equivalent of getting 370 miles of range if you're doing a little bit more efficient that day. So yeah, gone are miles per gallon. Now it's watt hours per mile. And you could do it in other ways. Like I've thought it'd be really interesting if they did like joules per mile or megajoules per mile, but I guess we're stuck in watt hours because that's how we gauge our electricity for payment. And it is possible to get even better efficiency. And so this is one day I was going to the Twin Cities. I was kind of taking it slow, like 65 miles an hour instead of 73 or faster that you might drive Highway 52 to the cities. And I was kind of drafting behind a truck. And it's actually a lot easier on the Tesla because you can put it on autopilot, and then you set the distance to follow them to be so number of car lengths. And so like it's kind of stressful if you're actually drafting without this autopilot or something that can keep a specific range between you and the car in front. But you can get down, and if you did this way, it'd be like 454 miles of range if you drove like that all the time, which, I don't know, it wasn't bad, just a little bit slower than normal. And so this one's from kind of like a really interesting part about in a car. I mean, if you go faster, you're going to get worse miles per gallon, but it's very minimal. Like it seems like 10% difference going 65 versus 75. But in electric vehicles, since you have so much more efficiency, there's less kind of like fudge room for how the numbers work. And so aerodynamic drag takes over for electric vehicles at the high speeds. And so the deal with drag is the force that it puts on you goes by the cube of the speed. And so when you cube something, it gets really huge really fast. It's kind of like this parabolic curve going up. And so what we got is you can look at 2.5 times more drag at 75 miles per hour versus 55. And if you just do the comparing 75 versus 55 miles per hour, you get 40% range more just going slower. And so for electric car owners, that's your way out. If you notice that you're driving somewhere and it doesn't look like your battery's going to make it, just slow down. And it's like such a simple solution, but it makes such a huge difference. Just slowing down will allow you to get to your destination safely if you ever have any of that sort of problem. If you live in Rochester, you'll never have that problem because everything's pretty close. But if you're driving really far distances, that can be a really interesting way of getting there. So cold weather is something that when I first made this talk, it was in September, and I didn't have any cold weather data, at least my own personal stuff. I just heard stuff about people were talking about how it affects your car, but at least here's some real world information for you. There's that 124-mile trip to the Twin Cities. It was all highway, very similar to that last one. It was in 10-degree weather. This was in, I think it was December. I took this picture, well, 12 degree or whenever it was 12 degrees. Then I was still able to get 306 watt hours per mile. And so that's pretty much the same as what the car is rated at. I wasn't getting those really tiny numbers as before, but 12 degree weather, 10 degree weather, it's not a big problem at all.
Is that with the heater off?
This one, I think this is not too much heater. I think this is like car seat heater only. But yeah, I'll cover car seats. Car seat heaters are really important. And then this one is 0 degrees. This was January 19th last week, so I don't have the -10 from this last weekend. But this one this is doing like full blast heater on and like seat heater and just everything going. And I kind of did this for science here. This is driving around Rochester. And I was able to get 541 watt hours per mile, so it's almost double what the car says you should get, and that's just to keep the heat up. And so that's probably about almost worst case, and this is not doing highway, this is doing city streets. And so this is about the worst situation you could have, and you would still get 184 miles going there. When these slides I actually have them posted up so you guys can download them too. I think a lot of Tesla owners, because there's so much, everything's new about trying to figure out how far you can go, and the charging situation it's getting better, and I think you can do long trips, but it's something that you have to think about a little, so Tesla owners turn into statistics people. So in Minnesota, all the Teslas have heated seats right now, and heated seats are much more efficient for keeping you warm than blowing the blowing heat. And so probably it's a huge difference. It must be, I should probably wrote up the number, but having the heat seater, and you can choose which seat to turn the heat seater on, that will keep you nice and warm and without heating up all the air around you. And so it's like conduction heat versus air heat. And it makes a big difference as far as energy usage, and you still feel good. You also won't have dry air in your face all the drive, and so I'd probably recommend that for Minnesota people. Preheat the car in the garage. There's some heat that is required to keep the battery at a certain temperature. The battery doesn't want to be -10, and so there's a heater in there. It's an automatic element that keeps it at a certain temperature. And so the idea is when you're in your garage, the garage door closed, you just use the app, or you go in the car and you just turn on the heating to heat up the air in the car, and also to maybe charge your car up a little bit. And that extra energy, heating up the battery while it's plugged into the wall, that can get you a lot more range because you don't have to waste heat when you're actually driving to heat up your battery. And the nice thing about it is, since it's not a gas engine, you can actually preheat the car with your garage door closed. If you had a gas engine and you preheated your car with the garage door closed, you would die of carbon monoxide. But in an electric car, you can do it, and it's way nicer. You can just stroll in your garage and then open up your car with the garage door closed and without draft, and then you're warm the whole time. It's way better. You can even turn on when you wake up in the morning to preheat your car from the app that just comes with it. So I like that a lot. The car does come with the charging cable, and I kind of put it down here. You can definitely come up and see it. This is the stock one that comes with the car and has a few different plugs on there. One of them is a dryer plug, and that's probably the best case scenario. If you already have a 240 volt in your house, you can just use that same dryer plug or have one installed, and then you can just charge your car with that. Or I'll show what I actually have in my garage, but I keep this in my car all the time. And if you want more range, just go slower. And so that's their 40% more range if you just slow down a little bit. So back to kind of my personal situation, I have this, I'm driving a lot more, and I'm visiting a lot of people. And I was like, am I out of whack when I'm going to say I'm going to drive 30,000 miles a year? And so this is from the Department of Transit. And I think this is such an interesting chart because it says so much in a way, a low mileage car is 12,000 miles a year. And so it's of course, old retired grandmas, they don't drive that much, but does anyone else drive 12,000 miles a year? It's very little, I guess. And so I'm unfortunately in that 35 to 54 group, and I'm driving more than everyone else. And so that's the reason why it's kind of weird when people say low mileage cars. I'm not sure who has these low mileage cars. So this is my kind of equation here. The Toyota Avalon is the car I'm going to compare to the Model S. And so if I drive 30,000 miles a year, I will update this gas cost per gallon in some later slides. But if you were to do that, it would cost you $3,000 a year to drive this car, that much, just for gas. And if you did an electric car, I'm using Rochester rates, 10%. It's 11% in the winter, 11 cents, and then maybe 9 cents in the summer, something like that, and it averages out to 10. The efficiency, when you take electricity from the wall and put energy into the battery, there's, of course, some loss. And people estimate it's around 80%. I've seen people say 90% because you're converting AC to DC and then charging up a chemical battery, a lithium battery. So there is some loss there. It's hard to get exactly what the number is, but I think 80 is pretty pessimistic. And then watt hours per mile, 300. So this is maybe the average of summer and winter. And then watt hours consumed, like you're doing 8.6 megawatt hours, which is not a huge amount, but it's probably like many homes worth for days. The cost per year is $1,100. So you can kind of compare the two. If I just do the Avalon versus the Model S with gas prices from September, it's 2.83 times better if you had an electric car. And you can compare it to some other ones like Ford F-150 or BMW 7 Series. And the 7 Series requires, premium gas for all these nice cars, so you get an extra bump there. So then, I don't know, the big question is like, what is gas prices going to be in 2023? Like, I saw someone say that maybe gas prices will crash in 2023 because there's so many electric vehicles, and that'd be a really interesting thing to happen out of all this. And I guess, I don't know if I'm happy or sad about that, but yeah, I'm doing the commodity prices for you guys. And another interesting thing is, if you looked at the price of gas for a Ford F-150 versus the purchase price, I mean, there's tons of F-150s. It's like four-door and all this sort of stuff. But if I just choose one of them, you're almost paying the same amount in gas as you are to buy the vehicle, which is an interesting thing that's happened for the industry. And if you live in the Twin Cities, it's actually a way cheaper energy. So all these numbers would be way better if I lived up there. So it makes me a little bit sad. This was just an interesting side note. This was a theft rate for Teslas. And so, all Teslas, like most modern cars, have electronic ignitions. But even if you could try and jerry-rig it, it's probably way harder than a lot of cars because it's like a software-based kind of car. And this guy at the crime bureau was saying it was very hard for criminals to steal these cars. And the recovery rate, like if you have your car stolen, how often do you get it back? In 2016, they were very lucky, 100% recovery rate, while if you have any other car, or the average of the US, you only get your car back 58% of the time. Oh, and those like bees, I have references where I got them at the end of the slides. So home charging, this is pictures from my garage. On the right, that's the Tesla kind of home charger. Costs about $500, and then I had an electrician put it in. I probably got gouged because I didn't shop around, and the Rochester electricians never got back to me, so I had a Twin Cities guy do it. But he did a great job. He drilled through joists. I would never have been able to do that. That was about $1,000. And then that's what it looks like when you plug it in the snowy garage. It just plugs in, kind of where the gas spout goes on a car. Very similar port. So how much is it for a wall connector? Like, if you didn't want to install that, you could just have a 240 volts, 30 amp in your garage, and that'd be perfect for this car. Like, you don't need to go higher than that. I had a 240 60 amp, and it just allows you to charge slightly faster. So this is where we're going to kind of like go through. On Tesla's website, you can put in the price of gas and how far you drive, and it will give you the cost savings versus gasoline. And so this is one where, I'm starting with September gas, $2.75. It was saying every day that I do this 200-mile trip, I would save $18. And I was like, that's a great deal. Like, I'm going to be, that makes me feel better about this purchase. And then, gas prices today, $2.05 is what it was on Gas Buddy. And so now I still do that trip. I'm only saving $11.50. And like, what if trends continue? What if we go below sub $1 gas? And like the parity point is actually at 85 cents per gallon. And so if it ever gets that way, you're paying it just as much as I am for transportation. Yep. So we'll see if that happens. I'd be curious. So the Tesla Supercharging, this is all charging at home, which I'd recommend for everybody. Like if you have a garage, it's a no-brainer. It's way cheaper to charge at home. It's more convenient. You wake up every morning with a full charge. And so I never have to go to a gas station in the middle of the night with that really cold handle that smells really bad and put the gas in. And so it's way better just do it at home. It's just there for you all the time. And so like these are the different ways. So this is destination chargers. So these are the same speed that you get at home. And so that's one thing. Like when you book a hotel, you might look for places that have Tesla Superchargers or other types of chargers. And they're usually free. Like I stayed in the city, hotel in the Twin Cities over Christmas with my family, and we found a hotel that had Tesla chargers, and I thought it was a great little perk. The other ones are, you can actually do, so I'll kind of move forward here. In the Twin Cities, I mean, you have to drive somewhere kind of far to actually need a supercharger, but that red one is in Woodbury. And that's a operating supercharger. It has like 8 or 10 stalls. And you can charge your car pretty much to like 80% full in 40 minutes, which is enough to go a really long ways. And so you could do that. And these other ones, those gray kind of lightning bolts, those are ones that Tesla says they're going to have come out. And I was sad, like some of them, like that Bloomington one, which would be so close to my work, that one's not opening until 2018. Well, it's supposed to open in 2018, but has not opened yet. So yeah, they have plans to make it bigger. But let's see here. In Rochester, there is a supercharger. It's by Hy-Vee, by the Apache Mall. And that's the red one there, and that's the picture of what it looks like. And there's 2 destination chargers. They're both hotels in Rochester where, you know, if you have someone come in from out of town and you don't have the electricity hookups, they could just charge up there if they stayed at those hotels. All these red dots are currently operating superchargers in the United States. And so pretty much the point of the supercharger is to be able to make long trips. Like if you want to go from Minneapolis, Rochester to Orlando, Florida, you can chart your way through there and you can get there without any problem. They're actually spaced closer than you need to. And they're always in places where there's like food and restrooms and stuff. So I'll show on the next picture. So this is a trip where I had it plot for me how to get from Minneapolis to Orlando. And those are the stops I'd have to make. And kind of the more interesting one is like in the little big console, it's a huge, bigger than an iPad screen. You type in your destination. And if I typed in Orlando, oh, it's actually the video works. So yeah, so I type in Orlando. And then it uses Google Maps, which is kind of cool. All these cars have LTE Wi-Fi on them, or LTE cell service on them. And it uses that to look up where GPS locations, downloading maps, and doing this sort of supercharger stuff. And so I think this was in my garage, and it was here. I think it was actually using Wi-Fi, which was really slow. But eventually it comes up. Maybe I'll just skip it. But yeah.
Is that inside your car?
Yeah, yep, that's inside my car. Yep. Oh yeah, did it work too good? Oh shoot. Yeah, that's inside my car. Yep. Yeah. Cool. Was there more for that question?
No.
Okay. Yeah, this is actually my car. Yep.
I've got a question. At these superchargers along the way,
Yeah.
do they have fees for them?
Yeah. Yep. So pretty much the fee. I think what's happened is pretty much double the electric rate. So if it cost me in Rochester to fully charge up the car, it's about $10 or $11. If I was going to use a supercharger, it would probably be about $22. And so it's still cheaper than gas, like even if you do the stuff, but it becomes much closer to gas if you're using superchargers all the time. And so, yeah, I'd only use them if either you didn't have access to charging in a garage or some other location like your workspace or something, or you're doing long distances. Those are the only times I would ever use a supercharger.
Eldon, does Tesla own those superchargers?
They do.
Maintain those?
Yep, yeah, Tesla owns all of them. So there's, Tesla superchargers are the best bet because they charge much faster than your home. The amount of electricity that goes through a supercharger is at least 10 times more than even what I have at 240 60 amp. There's insane voltages and insane amperage on those things. So they have outside you can see there's industrial huge transformers they have to make that really high DC voltage. And so, that's what it is. But there's other companies called ChargePoint is a very popular one. And they have a whole bunch of 240 volt, like 15 amp or 30 amp chargers for all the people like Nissan Leafs and I'm sure other cars that will come out. And those are much slower but those are also sometimes free. For example, at the Apache Mall on West Circle Drive in Rochester, there's 2 charging stations with kind of a green logo on them, and those are actually free. And so, I could park my car there. It's never useful for me. I don't like parking away from people. I'm too crazy about my car. But if you park there, you could probably get about 30 miles of range in 1 hour, which is not too bad for free, just for shopping at Hy-Vee. In the Twin Cities, it's like that at lots of malls too. But so pretty much if you did that calculation, like you want to go to Orlando, the picture is kind of like what showed up for me, the different times and stuff, and I kind of put it into table format, and so you can kind of get an idea what it's like to take a road trip with a Tesla. And so the first step I would drive to Iowa. I would drive this is from Minneapolis, so it'd be Minneapolis to Iowa in 3 hours and 15 minutes, and I'd stop there for 60 minutes to charge. And then you go to Missouri after 2 hours and 41 minutes, and you charge for these different times. And what's interesting is it calculates different charging times because it doesn't want you to like charge you up to 100%, because on the next slides I'll show that it slows down charging when you get closer to 100, but it's calculating what it thinks is the optimal route of doing the minimum amount of supercharging to get to your destination. And so pretty much the travel time versus charging is 3.25. And I mean, in the end, like you do need to take bathroom breaks on large trips like this and, eat lunch. There's lots of reasons to stop. And so it's not as bad as what you might think. And I actually think it might be a better way to travel than doing like the 12-hour nonstop, because that just sounds really painful. But yeah, that's how you would do it and what it would look like to do that trip. And this is a picture about how fast it charges. And so, it's a battery, and like when you put more energy into the battery, it gets harder and harder to find a free, electron spot for it to go. And so when you're at low charge, like 0 to 50%, you can charge very, very fast. But then when you get beyond that, it starts slowing down. And so that last 90%, they actually don't recommend you to charge beyond 90% just because it's hard on the battery as far as like charging really high, but it's also really slow. And so if you're doing a trip, you probably don't really want to do that very much. So I guess side effects of buying a Tesla, like I was never into cars very much. Like you could probably see the cars that I bought were like Corollas and Priuses. And so those aren't car guy cars. And so I had no idea that there's this thing called car detailing. And so after I got this car, I was like, what? I want to take care of it. And I guess car detailing is the word you use for like taking care of your car to probably like levels that are maybe not good for you. And so like it talks about waxing and like spraying the leather with different materials and like taking care of your car really nice. And so I thought it was an interesting side effect of getting a Tesla. Chemical Guys on YouTube, I've actually liked that channel quite a lot. Learned everything I know about it, about detailing from them. When I don't care about gas prices, that's kind of, because I used to be really obsessed with it. Car vibration, Teslas are really quiet. Like there's no vibration because like in an internal combustion engine, you have like hundreds of, well, it's an RPM, so let's imagine like, I don't know, thousands of explosions per minute going on inside the car. And on good cars, like they can kind of make it quieter, but when you're accelerating, you definitely can hear the engine noise, and some people really like that, but I don't really care for it, and I'd rather just listen to like the music I was listening to, or I listen to a lot of audiobooks now. And the quietness is a really nice selling point of the car if you've never had that before. So yeah, like listen to audiobooks, got a subscription to Audible, and the Tesla Autopilot. I don't have time to talk about that today. Make sure I'm not kind of on time, but Tesla Autopilot is quite amazing, and I'm definitely not qualified to talk about the technology behind it, but when you're driving from Rochester to the Twin Cities, it's about an hour and a half for something drive, and if you can use Autopilot to steer the car for you and to like avoid hitting other cars, it's a lot less mental strain, and I thought that was a really amazing part of the Teslas, and hopefully all car manufacturers can do that sort of stuff. Maintenance is a question I always get about what do you have to do on an electric car? And so this is from the Tesla's website, and they recommend coming in every year or those many miles to do certain things. But when you look at what things they're recommending you to do, I would say a lot of them are not what you would call like car maintenance pieces that are like necessary to go into a dealership for. For example, some are like rotating your tires or doing wheel alignment checks or wiper blades and stuff. Like I wouldn't call that like car maintenance. I would just say like that's just regular wear and tear you got to do. So I kind of simplified this down for the Model S. And so pretty much the simplified version is You come in every 8 years or 100,000 miles to do a battery coolant, which is kind of like the radiator fluid in the car. And then there's this brake fluid replacement. And maybe that one's not even quite exactly like maintenance on your car. So there's no spark plugs. There's no oil changes. There's no radiator belts, or timing belts. None of that stuff. It's just that this is like no maintenance, anticipated maintenance for this car. I think that's pretty amazing because I know I have a friend who has a BMW, and I think it was like, was it $400 or $500 for an oil change? It was ridiculous stuff, but they only do it it's like 50,000 miles or something. But yeah, like it's very, very interesting stuff. So battery maintenance, they don't actually recommend you to charge to 100%. And the reasoning they say is just hard on the battery, is not that useful. It has something to do with like degrading your battery faster than normal. And so the recommendation I've seen, the pessimistic one, is keep it between 90 and 10% for daily use. So don't go to like 1%. But ideally, you do 80 to 20%. But in reality, if you're trying to figure out which one to use, the recommendations, which are a little bit conflicting, it probably doesn't matter. So charge 100% sparingly only for trips, and don't supercharge like every day, because it's supercharging just huge voltages. It's actually hard on the battery. It's a lot of heat too.
In your garage, can you tell it how much to charge overnight?
Oh yeah, yep, yeah. It actually has some options where you can say, like if you live in the Twin Cities, they have off-peak charging. So there's an option on there that says start charging at 10 p.m. And there's another option that says how much charge do you want to do? And I try to keep mine at 85, unless I'm going to the cities, then I'll put it to 90. There's a little slider you do on there. And yeah, that's what I do for my car. And I don't know, in Rochester, I've actually asked RPU, like, can they have off-peak charging for electric cars? But they don't really have any explanation for it yet. I did see that in the latest RPU newsletter, they talked about RPU gets its energy from another source, and the cost is the other source actually charges them off-peak. Like even in the winter, it's like, I think it was like 10.5 cents during the day, and at nighttime it was like 9.5 cents from wherever RPUs gets their energy from, their collective. And so there's a little bit of incentive there, but I guess it's not enough, or there's something else going on that the Twin Cities can do that we can't do in Rochester. But you know, we can keep bugging them. I'd love to get cheaper energy. But yeah, any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
What's the lifespan for the battery?
Oh, sure. Yeah, like,
You said you supercharge it too much, it degrades the battery, so I
you
assume
know, yeah.
the battery wears out.
Yep. Yeah, they warranty the battery for, on the Model S, at least it's 8 years and unlimited miles. And that covers like the battery and like the motor and stuff. So their kind of definition of like degraded battery, I think, was 85 or 80% of the original like energy capacity. And like if it got below that, they would replace it for you. And so that'd be like my worst case. I've seen graphs of people with early Model S's, and they seem to lose maybe like 1% a year of range. And then they seem to slow down after 5 or 7 years to kind of plateau out about like somewhere above 90%. And so that's what I think will probably happen with the battery, that, you know, 10 years from now, I'm expecting it to be maybe 90% as good as the day I bought it. And I think it'll probably stay there. That's what I'm hoping will happen, and I'd be pretty cool with that. Like, only get 10% less gas mileage is about what kind of a normal car gets.
But other than that, you shouldn't have to replace the battery.
No, yeah, I shouldn't. Yep.
Is that lithium-ion technology, or is it some other kind of technology?
Yeah, it's lithium ion. Yep. Yeah, it's just regular. I guess there's this battery type called 18650, which, as far as I can tell, I think is actually just like a size of battery. So it's like this huge battery about this tall and maybe like this wide as cylinder. And there's just like a whole bunch of them in the bottom of the car. It's about half the weight of the car is the battery on the Model S's. Yeah.
How many police have you outrun with that thing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, like, I know when I first got the car, like, I didn't want to test the performance model of the Model S, because that one is 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, which is pretty much like supercar area. Like you'd have to get like some sort of like, what's it called? A really, something much faster than a Porsche 911 to beat that car. Like it would be like McLaren's or something like that. But the one I got is just the regular 100D Model S, and that one's at 4.1 seconds 0 to 60, which is pretty fast. It would be like, I would imagine almost every Corvette and like, lots of other cars. But yeah, I don't drive it too fast because I'm nervous about getting a ticket. But it's been really fun. My kids really like when I go on the side roads and accelerate.
Another question.
Oh, sure.
Go there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, in the front row.
I was just wondering, if you had to leave your car outside unplugged overnight,
Oh, sure.
and we had one of these 30 below nights like we've been
Oh, yeah.
predicting, does that do a job on the
Oh,
battery?
yeah, I mean, all of the temperature control stuff, it's all automatic. Like, I mean, there's nothing that I do to change it. So I think you'd be fine. Like, I've left it, maybe not in minus 10 degree weather, but I've left it at the airport for like days at a time when it's been freezing for sure. And it only seems to take out about like 1% a day of the battery leaving at the airport. I imagine maybe colder times might be a little bit more, but I don't think you'd be hard up if you had to do that. They do recommend, if you can, just always plug it in, even with one of the jacks is the 240 like adapter for a clothes dryer, but also comes with a regular like 120 volt, just regular plug like in your house. And they're like, yeah, just plug that in if you can. Like, just get an extension cord and plug it in, and you still will charge even in super cold weather, just very, very slowly. It's 3 miles per hour with 110 outlets, so it's really slow.
So with the cold weather, it automatically uses some of the battery charge to keep the battery warm.
Yeah.
So that the battery doesn't lose charge because it gets cold.
Yeah, yep, yeah, it's all automatic. Yeah, yep. Yeah, and so there's not even controls to change it. It's just kind of on its own. The only way you can like preheat the battery is to say, when you wake up, you say it might be at like 80% from overnight, and then maybe it takes you an hour to wake up and get ready to go, and then when you first wake up, you just tell the car charge up to 85%, and then so while you're getting ready, it can charge up the battery, and that generates a lot of heat that would get you ready to go. Yeah. Oh yeah, up there.
I had a question. When you're comparing costs, when you get gas, there's gas tax on that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I didn't see where you figured that in.
Oh sure. Yeah.
Cost per mileage. Then
Yeah.
you're buying electricity, you have sales tax on that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
if you
There's.
take those out, then how do things compare? And then
Oh,
are you
sure.
looking forward to a wheelage tax?
Wheelage tax? Oh, yeah. I mean, hopefully they have the carbon tax. That would be really awesome for me, but I think what would probably happen is, yeah, like sales tax, RPU has, is definitely more than 7% tax when the bill comes due. I guess, I don't know, did I have all those taxes in there? But maybe 20% tax, I suppose, on RPU when you actually do everything. But yeah, I suppose like gas, yeah, I didn't have that in my numbers all the way through, but I don't know. I think the volatility is probably the interesting question. Like, the nice thing about electric vehicles is they can use anything. Like, the joke is like a Tesla is the only car that can run on coal. Like, you know, like, I mean, it can run on coal, it could run on solar energy, it could run on of you know, anything. And so what would hopefully happen that people would figure out is, what is the cheapest way to generate electricity, which is like the whole point of RPU, to like give us the cheapest electricity from wherever it comes from in the future as new things come out. And so I'm hoping that that would keep electricity prices cheaper than what will happen with gas prices. And that's just my kind of idea. Like, gas prices is one commodity. It comes from certain places. It's probably finite. And that one might change, I guess. But electricity, it can come from so many different sources. It probably has, hopefully, less volatility going forward. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep.
So if you were on a long trip and you messed up and you ran out of battery, is there infrastructure to bail you out, like AAA or
Oh, sure.
trucks nowadays have a
Oh, yeah.
generator, at least gets you a couple miles, or?
Yeah, I guess if I ever ran out of battery, for me, it would just be an automatic call to AAA, just a tow. Like, I wouldn't even try to think of other ways of doing it. I've seen people try to say you could maybe travel, well, I don't think it's even practical. Like, you could have those portable generators, and those can put mileage on your car, but I don't think it's practical. At least right now, no one runs around with those. Even tow trucks don't seem to run around with, because you need 240 volts to get any, like, appreciable range. And yeah, so I'd be curious if they could fix that in the future. But right now I'm just like, well, if that happens, I'll just get an Uber somewhere I need to go, and then I'll call a tow truck to bring my car somewhere so I can plug it in.
Yeah, but if you're stuck in the middle of nowhere, you don't have many Ubers.
Oh yeah, I'm a millennial. I just feel, is there Uber everywhere? But, yep. Cool.
Well, if there's no more questions, let's give Eldon a hand.
Awesome, thanks guys.
Grand Island, Nebraska. 215 miles. And I don't think they have a charging station. I had a